Okay. Hi, everybody. Today is Tuesday, January 23rd, and welcome to the weekly Kubernetes SIG Testing meeting. I am your host, Aaron Krickenberger. This meeting is being recorded and will be publicly posted to YouTube shortly. So anything you can say will be on the permanent record forever and ever and ever and ever. Okay. So first up on the agenda, we have a couple items from Ryan Phillips. Ryan, I'm just going to hand it to you to take it away, if that's cool.
Cool. Yeah, thanks. So I have two questions. The first one is revolving around a PR to make the lease reconciler in the API server the default. And right now there's not any HA end-to-end tests in the tree at all, as far as I know. And I was wondering what everyone's impression is on how to get the lease reconciler and the API server to beta and eventually to GA. So that's the first question that I have.
There are no formalized blown out HA configuration. We are working on that in the SIG cluster lifecycle. That is part of the default blocking jobs queue. I don't know if Justin wants to chime in there. He might have something that's blocking in COPS to update the config if they wanted to, but that would open up a can of worms there. I don't know if anyone wants, there's no one that wants to own this, right? Like SIG cluster lifecycle would have to own all of that. And they would have to federate out the issues that come with it too. So I think people are slowly treading there, but I don't see that happening anytime soon as a default blocking job to have highly available configurations with all of the testing degree there.
As I commented on PR, I think integration testing might be a good starting point. You don't necessarily have to have like real HA deployments, but you could still validate that, you know, you did fail over properly. I'm assuming like I was looking for someone who is better sort of equipped to answer that question from an actual deployment perspective, whether it was possible to isolate the behavior in question. I think that was the case, then at least we could have some degree of confidence that it would work.
I think one of the difficulties is that it uses the storage API directly. I don't know if that's testable outside of via the API server.
API, what do you mean?
So the code as a stopgap writes the endpoints into the storage API.
What is
and
the
then
storage API?
I don't know if
Talking about
Tim
etcd?
or someone. Yeah, directly into etcd.
So you can absolutely have etcd as part of this.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's some work ongoing. I think there's a lot of integration tests today that use etcd. So if etcd is a requirement, that's not a blocker. I just wasn't sure whether you could get a representative test that would be useful. If you can find someone with enough HA knowledge to answer that question, then at least you can close off the possibility of integration versus having to go full-blown HA, which implies a lot more work.
Okay.
I'm a little lost about, but we do now have HA tests for COPS. And there is a disruptive test, which I don't think we're running today. So I don't know whether you can combine those two things in a, like whether you create another job. Obviously, we don't want more COPS blocking jobs. I'm sure we can all agree on that. I think it's certainly relatively easy to create a new job, and I don't know if you can tweak one of the existing disruption tests. I don't know if we have any that do enough pain to cause enough disruption to trigger the behavior you're trying to hit.
I mean, you're trying to influence a failover scenario, right?
Yeah, exactly.
How about a failure we're trying to simulate, though?
I guess my limited exposure to HA and the OpenShift side is that, I mean, if you were to have two masters and you were to fail one, and you just make sure that you actually see handoff, you know, within a reasonable amount of time, I mean, really, you're just talking about the masters and etcd participating in that. You don't necessarily need a full cluster. unless I'm missing something. I'm not saying you don't want to do the more involved testing. I'm just saying as a base case, you're testing that something is working. Maybe not, you still need to do the larger level test, but that could be influenced by all kinds of things. Whereas this is just, is my failover mechanism reliable?
That makes sense. So maybe start with looking into the COPS tests and seeing if it might fit in someplace in there.
Yeah, I mean, so there should be plenty. I think you have all the pieces to do, and with COPS, what you should be able to do is randomly kill off a master and hope you got the leader, or like try to figure out which one is the master and do that, or kill off all 3 masters just for fun and see if it recovers from that. But
I mean, to be clear, the link I posted is a job that has the words COPS and HA in it, and it's been continually failing. So I'm trying to understand. Are you talking about a different COPS job that stands up 3 masters?
That one is probably brand new,
Okay.
isn't it? Wasn't it like a couple of hours old? A couple of days? Oh, yeah, it's 94. All right, so it's from the weekend. So we have it. There's also, yeah. That hit a different bug in COPS, which we have a PR for. It's blocked. It's also blocked behind the COPS jobs, like everyone else. And when we get more capacity in AWS, I will create the equivalent job in AWS.
Okay. But I guess what I heard Tim say at the outset is we don't have a canonical HA configuration, and nobody is currently willing to step up and say they will take responsibility for ensuring that HA configuration works. Unless I'm hearing you, Justin, say that COPS will stand up and be the canonical HA configuration for now, since nobody else is willing to do it.
It sounds good to me, except I should caveat that we don't yet support etcd3, so I'm sure some people will be like, oh, but yes, we have an HA configuration that COPS supports, has always supported. It does failover, it does all of that, and we support it anyway for COPS needs.
It has to support the stack that we vet as part of all the other tests, though. That's the problem with the blocking configuration.
I mean, this is a supported configuration. Yeah.
Okay. And the alternate tack sounds like if we wanted to not have to go through that problem, test and integration, who would be the appropriate person for Ryan to talk to get expertise on how the integration tests work today?
Probably me, and I should say, I'm not saying the integration tests are a replacement for a full cluster test, it's just that they're a starting point.
Right.
But yeah, I would agree with Tim that this is maybe something that we could talk about in test comments.
Okay. So then, moving on, Ryan, you've got the next thing about E2E node testing. Okay, how about that?
Yes, I had a question about, I think from my general impression of how the testing infrastructure works, there's still some things in Jenkins, and my goal is to try, is that a true statement?
No. Jenkins is
Okay.
dead. It's not actually technically 100% dead, like 1.6 is around, but end of month it is dead. There's no Jenkins.
Okay, so do they still run though?
What?
The Jenkins node?
All the Jenkins configuration under the node, under Kubernetes node E2E are dead. I'm supposed to remove those. I have to do.
Okay.
All the jobs are already migrated to Crow, and should be used just use the node runner to trigger them.
Okay, my goal is to try and use the CoreOS, I work for CoreOS, to use the base flavor of, or the stable flavor of CoreOS on those builds. Is that an easy thing to change?
Is that just a different image version? What?
Yeah, we would like to use the family whenever it gets uploaded, use the latest stable.
Inside test infra, I can post you a link.
Okay, but it sounds like there's a script that generates a bunch of the Node E2E configurations, I think, and those are already run as proud jobs today. So
So
Okay.
under that link, there's a few of like image configs. Those are, you can create your own image config there and set up test, run test against those, like your own image config.
And when I was looking at this, they're pinned to specific image versions. I submitted a PR a month or two ago about using a flavor-based image to constantly track a stable CoreOS released image. Is that supported in the framework?
That you might want to talk to the Node team.
Okay.
Also, it might be better to explicitly bump the image like on purpose rather than have the image get updated and then see the job.
Yeah. The problem is that when we go and release different Kubernetes versions, like 1.8, 1.7, they're pinned to old versions of CoreOS images. And so we have to keep those around forever, which is fine, but it would be nice to be able to just track a latest stable as we go along when we do Kubernetes releases. Do you guys think, at least do you guys think that's a good goal in the old stable releases to track the CoreOS image as the latest stable, or pin it to a certain version?
I think that's a downstream constraint. Like, I'm not speaking from experience, but when I had to deal with this on Atomic, we had separate testing infrastructure that would basically do bleeding edge on Atomic and run all of the tests and produce results from that side. But it was a downstream constraint. We never tried. There was a point in time where we tried to push that upstream, but then we raised our hands because the integration with test grid wasn't all there and no one was watching the signal on the other side. So we just stopped. So it's totally a downstream constraint for your environment. I would not push that constraint on the upstream.
Okay. I guess that answers both my questions. I appreciate it.
cool, thanks. Next up, I'm going to hand over to Matt Landis to talk about the upcoming co-working day we have scheduled here in Seattle. Matt?
Yeah, so it's this Friday. We have the room from 10 to 5. I don't know what time we actually want to start. Somebody had mentioned 11. So if anybody has any thoughts on that, I'm open.
Yeah, so I had a couple questions around just some basic administrivia, like do we have the capability there to support people attending remotely if they can't make it or they're not here in Seattle?
See, the easiest would be to do it through Chime. If the room is VC enabled, so that's all done through Chime. I've had trouble hooking up a camera to my computer, but I'm like one of the few Linux users here, or getting my computer to use the camera and stuff.
Okay.
I might be able to track down like a second laptop we could use as a video input, so we could use Zoom.
Okay.
I think if the room supports Chime, that we should, use that, since that seems easier.
Okay.
I mean, that's sort of a lot of the times for our meetings outside of this, we'll use Hangouts because the rooms at Google support that. So I feel like, whatever's easiest for the room is a good sort of pattern to follow. Okay.
Yeah, so I'll get the Chime meeting set up and throw that in the meeting notes once I have it here.
How about another thing would be, how about, since obviously most of us are not Amazon employees, can you send instructions for like how we actually get, into the room?
Yeah, so you'll have to go to the front desk and kind of wait there for somebody to come and get you. It'll probably be me or one of the other people from the team. Unfortunately, we have that policy. You got to escort you everywhere in the building. Parking will be validated at the end of the day. So bring your parking ticket, and we can validate that at the front desk before we leave. We'll have lunch. We also have a team happy hour or social event thing every Friday from 4 to 5, so we could crash the my orgs that if we want to start off there. And then somebody had mentioned a social afterwards for whoever wants to come to that. So it's, as far as agenda goes, I think that's more on, I don't know, I'm relatively new to the testing SIG, and Aaron had a bunch of suggestions for agenda, so those all sound good to me from what I understand.
You have somebody invading your space there. You should remind them of the cone of personal space.
Oh.
Yeah, so like, I'm happy if we just sort of show up. Oh, wow, I managed to close my browser window, so I can't look at it. I'm happy if we just show up and whatever, continue to hack on whatever we're hacking on, but it also seemed like it might be a good time to get everybody in a room and kind of agree on a couple things. So if anybody has any suggestions, I think we should like keep the conversation going on the mailing list or add to the meeting notes. But the things I have seen come up lately are like mostly around the idea of blocking jobs. So a while back, I kind of was trying to define what sort of criteria should we, like let's be clear, we don't actually have anything documented for what a blocking job is and what we should do with it. And I think we should do that. I think we should document that. I think we should describe like the criteria for a blocking job. And I think we should have documentation on like, how do we act if a job that's blocking merges starts to fail for so long? How do we act if a job that is blocking the release is failing for so long? So I have a proposal linked in the doc. I have a Google Doc, and then I have a SIG release issue. Part of the problem is since this defines release blocking jobs as well as merge blocking jobs, it kind of spans these two SIGs, and I don't know where to pull request docs anymore. But I want to like hash that out in front of people and see if we can come to consensus there. I think sort of related to that, we should then develop a process for how can people add new jobs and get them to the point where they're blocking. So I was thinking for our gracious host's benefit, if we could walk through the use case of how could we get EKS-based jobs roughly to the same place that GKE-based jobs are today, but with passing, where we sort of describe, what's the infrastructure that you have to hack on to add support to the right things in the right places, to how can we get to the point where Prow is actually running this stuff and block based on this. There was also an open question in the channel around like Windows-based support, and so I'm kind of trying to poke around in the background to see if that's like a Google thing where we spin up another different machine type in GCE, or if this is where I start to approach SIG Azure about whether they would want to do something similar to that EKS use case I walked through. I also think that collectively we could stand to talk about good and bad habits when it comes to proposing and rolling out automation changes. I think we're doing a pretty good job of talking within this group. I think we need to work on phasing that out through Contribux and the rest of the community on a whole. And it sure seems like we've had an awful lot of discussions around dependency management and Bazel and DEP and stuff lately. So those were just some ideas I had to give us some structure, but I'm totally fine if it's a free-floating day. I think the main thing for me is face-to-face is cool. It's really awesome to have high bandwidth, but I want to make sure that whatever decisions we come to are documented. So I'm happy to like volunteer myself as note taker and make sure that there's like a meeting notes thing that comes out of this, similar to how the contributor summits have happened in the past. Any questions? No, please, Matt, your thing, go.
No. My other question was, do we have any idea on who's gonna want to come to this? Number of people?
So I would say, maybe there's from Google in Seattle, there's maybe 4 who would come, 3 or 4.
Okay.
I'll be coming.
All right. Let's see, I'm trying to think of a good way to coordinate numbers. And then I also want to try and get you guys all my cell phone numbers so that if you need me to get you into the building because I'm escorting other people around, you're not sitting in reception all day.
You could use a Google form to send that to the list. Say, hey, we're having this, on Friday. Like, please reply if you want. That could be. Or, I'm sure there's some other. You don't want to use.
No, that's actually a good idea. I'll go ahead and do that then. I think that's all I had from my side. Oh, good.
Also, so we are from Sunnyvale side, and probably we cannot make it to Seattle this Friday, but we are also interested in our discussions you're going to have. So maybe during from 11 to 5, whenever you are going to have a open discussion session, you can maybe make a separate SIG testing event, something, so that we can hop in from remotely.
I think what we're trying to do is just set up a Chime channel and just leave it open the whole day. So anybody who wants to jump in can.
Is that a video conferencing thing? I'm not actually familiar with Chime.
Yeah, it is. It's much the same. It's, at least on a Mac, it's functionally pretty easy to set up, similar to Zoom.
Yeah, because we are unlikely to occupy a conference room the whole day. So it's better maybe hey, we are going to discuss something or we are back from lunch. Let's sync up.
Okay, yeah, we can set up a doc that kind of outlines stuff as we get together, figure out what time we want to talk about what, and just update that as the day goes on.
Oh, I was just going to expect them to be attentive and hop on whenever we were arbitrarily ready. But, scheduling stuff ahead of time sounds cool too.
Not quite scheduled at a time, a little more freeform than that.
Or just renting on Slack, say.
Yeah, totally.
I think we can definitely also keep Slack, updated of if we start an interesting conversation to post that there.
Yep. Okay. Cool. Other people have added some topics. That's awesome. Tim, why don't you tell us about the Testing Commons subproject?
So we're going to have a meeting tomorrow, probably. Maru, does 8 Pacific time work for you, or 7:30 possibly?
Yeah, either one works.
Okay. I don't know if that's too early or not. 7:30 will give us plenty of time. 8 might be a little crunched because there are some folks in the UK who want to attend and folks in other time zones. So I will send out and do updates. We're trying to hash out the details on that PR, and it's just hard coordinating people in different time zones across the world. So once we settle on tomorrow, we'll probably do 7:30, but we'll probably reach eventual consistency, and that PR will be updated appropriately with the right constructs because it's generated. So I'm thinking by the next time we meet, we'll have an updated PR with a time that people can agree to disagree about. So outside of that, the primary focus right now is just getting some of the infrastructure common stuff into that separate repository and making sure that we have some level of rigor around how it's being incorporated.
So I had similar administrative questions for this. My personal preference would be that we reuse this Zoom account to host that meeting tomorrow, and that it's recorded and posted to the same YouTube playlist that these meetings are posted.
I don't think I have ACLs to post to the YouTube list.
Okay.
If you send me that stuff, I can do that.
You and I can sync up on that offline. I think I just sent you a link. And then as far as an agenda or meeting notes goes, it makes sense to me if it's a separate doc that's linked to from these meeting notes. But
that's totally fine. That's what we do in other SIGs too. So SIG Cluster Lifecycle has the cluster API, and it's a totally separate doc that's iterated on.
Okay. And I linked to the pull request with details and the SIG testing thread that talks about this for folks who are interested. Tim, I'll sync up with you offline. My preference is to get your PR merged before, instead of blocking on the sub-project work that I'm doing on.
Sure. I'll just modify it, but I don't want to merge it until I have at least the time that people. Time is the hardest part right now. So.
For sure. And then just to dovetail off of that, I think I basically have most of the automation set up on the Kubernetes SIG Testing org and the frameworks repo. Thank you to everybody who helped me out there. I've managed to document most of what I have done if we want to follow that pattern going forward.
Ryan, most of your questions would be asked in that separate meeting.
Yep. Okay. Tim, did I cover your rant about cops in my rant about describing blocking jobs?
Kind of, and kind of not. I just want to make sure, because I didn't even know how many PRs. I was on a backlog of PRs, and I was trying to get them all through. So I literally have windows for windows that have windows. And all of them blocked on cops jobs. So
what correct me if I'm summarizing incorrectly. What I saw was the suggestion that when we run a cops job, we actually use the operating system image proposed in that pull request as opposed to something else. That was a conversation I saw between Mike, Denise, and Justin.
Yeah, there were a number of things that went wrong. So I think we're switching AWS accounts and we have some quota issues which are ongoing. There was some small issue with Intel chips or something, I don't know, which sort of forced everyone to like do a lot of updates and no one was able to really test them. And so we had a weird thing where this image, we had a bad image and then the image a week later seems to work, but we didn't have a procedure for testing. We didn't have a solid procedure for E2E testing of the images. And that I think has been addressed by, we now have a job that tests what we call our alpha channel, and we have a job that tests our stable channel. So promotion from alpha to stable will be gated on passing alpha. The blocking job will use the stable channel. Hopefully it won't magically like break, although it was flaky, so it is still possible, but hopefully we'll have a like consistent test run for a week and then we'll promote it. Mike Denise also pointed out that like it shouldn't have been able to pass. We're testing the current like stable rather than the version that the actual PR which promoted it shouldn't have passed anyway. And so that was the issue that you talked about merging. There was another issue which is like we'd like to go to. There was another unrelated issue as it turned out, which is like for our current just like test 4.9 kernels changed the connection tracking proc interface in a way that broke one of our tests, but I think we merged that PR. But that was sort of very unrelated to everything.
That helps. I mean, from my perspective, you know, we put in place a health check that should alert when things haven't merged within some amount of time and there are still things in the queue, and that alert fired. So that part of the system worked. I think the open question, which I want to see us hash out, is what do we then do? Like, what's the documented policy there? Because personally speaking, like I get really antsy when people are like, it's been broken for 24 hours, kick it out of the queue. I'd rather it's been broken for 24 hours and here is what we are doing to fix it and see some active communication there because it's blocking for a reason. Just kicking it out of the queue because it's failing means that broken stuff can still slip in the meantime, just in the abstract. Maybe we could have behaved differently in this release, but like actually documenting what we're going to do there, we don't. I want to see that happen because we don't have that.
I think if there are some blocking jobs which are absolutely critical to block the queue, and then there are other blocking jobs that are on the list that I don't necessarily know are critical to block the merge if they go out of whack for some level of time, right? Obviously, if it goes beyond a day, then there's something fundamentally wrong or broken, right? But if there's account issues or if there are flakes on a provider, if there are other constraints that occur, it seems like our definition of blocking might be a little rigid for some use cases. Like, so the signal that we have should either have a retry interval with a failover of some kind, or some change in policy. I think makes a lot of sense here.
Yeah, and this is why I want us to even document the policy we have to begin with before we start changing it, because it's all kind of verbal and organic right now.
I think one thing
blocking job should not run on a provider. The problem is like there is a provider right now, and it's Google, right? That Google is also a provider. You have to have some kind of provider in the first place.
Well, I think
yeah, but
help is it. Sorry, go on.
No, you go, Justin. Go ahead. I have something to say eventually, but
okay. I was just going to say one of the things that makes me uncomfortable about like turning off the cops jobs is it gives us a lot of coverage of things we don't otherwise have. And what I would love to see is more providers that are not cops, like that is KubeADM, that is Azure, that is all these things, so that we can turn off the cops job temporarily and still feel comfortable that we have coverage of an Ubuntu operating system or a CoreOS operating system or AWS or something, more signal that, like, the problem right now is we have effectively like two baskets, and we turn off, we've said we're not going to turn off the GCE basket, but if we turn off the other basket, we've lost like half of our coverage, which isn't great in the first place. So
I think it's more of a strategy than it is like because right now, like you mentioned before, there's only two bins, good, bad. And that we've applied other binning methodologies. And I think that's similar type of strategies you do.
Other baskets that just don't block. Like if we do actually have a Kubernetes pre-submit that's running all over the place, and we have some GKE stuff, we just don't block on them currently.
But you want to get the signal, but you want the signal to be good, and the signal can flake, and the signal can sometimes go errant. So you need a way of like debouncing that signal, so that way when it's good, and when it's flaking, we're just going to ignore it for the time being. We should raise it and, poke the person who's responsible for that job.
TestGrid has this in a way in that we alert on a certain number of consecutive failures, and we set that high enough. So we did have some notice that this was an issue.
Yeah, but we shouldn't block everybody else. Like once it reaches that threshold, what I'm saying is like reformulating the policy so that if it reaches that threshold, we should like not block everybody else in the queue.
Right, but we do have to make some policy around that because, like, for example, the base of a test job runs the unit tests, and if that starts failing, we can't just like kick out unit testing.
It seems reasonable, like in the abstract. So, for instance, with the unit tests, if they start 100% failing, like they should be hermetic enough that the fix there is a revert to code that went into the repo. Whereas, like with this, it could be like an API problem on a provider or something. And so when that's outside, like I still feel like the first action should be like a revert of some sort or a turn off of some sort. It shouldn't be a positive action. But if it's not something that's in the repo, that the job should just be taken out.
Yeah, anyway, this is we're over time, which is kind of why I'm trying to rush this along. Like this is all stuff we should talk about and put in a document somewhere, I think, so we can actually like have a policy in the first place and then iterate on that policy as we bump into these situations.
Do we want to schedule a breakout for this week? Do you want to just talk about it Friday?
I just want to talk about it Friday.
I think this is a good conversation for Friday.
Yeah, like I do have, there's a Google Doc linked here that Jace swore he was going to do some more wordsmithing on, but if he doesn't get it done by Friday, I will, because I think it's important for us to have something to talk over. And yeah, like clear ownership and flakiness and signal and stuff was part of it. Eric, you had something you wanted to say?
I mean, I can talk about it more on Friday, but like I really feel like part of the problem is I feel like the fact that we run so many jobs on GCP is more of a limitation than a desired state. Like I would like to get to a world where we have Minikube that handles most of our pre-submits, and so then it's easy for people to rerun them. I don't have to like I would not like to get to a world where there's like 20 different providers, and now I need to run on GCP and AWS and this other thing, and that's going to be super flaky and also really hard for me to get all 20 of those accounts to like potentially debug those. So I think we should, and ideally, but I think that maybe, I don't know if that's going to be controversial, and I think that's a good conversation to continue talking about on Friday.
Okay.
So that was it.
That's fair. I can totally take the next point offline, which is I saw a question go out for whether or not this SIG wanted to do an intro or a deep dive at KubeCon in Copenhagen. So I can follow up with folks in the chat. And then Steve, you had something about long-term plans for testing as a repo, which I think might also be a good conversation for Friday. But just real briefly, like the use of a separate Kubernetes SIG testing org, I think is something that we're piloting. I'm not sure how hard we actively want to lean into it until we see more concrete details about the different orgs and repositories and whatnot from the steering committee.
Yeah, that makes sense. The grass started just to look kind of greener in a place that didn't have a 60 million year runtime on a depth script.
Hoping to fix that today. Although I'm not sure. We might be, a little optimistic on the runtime of that.
I mean, I tried, and then I realized you have to import like something, and then
it's really bad. Whoever wrote that script is terrible.
What a jerk.
Okay, cool. Thanks everybody for your time. I apologize for going long today, and I look forward to seeing some of you in person on Friday. Happy Tuesday, everybody.